Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a seriously paradigm-shifting, incredibly detailed source text that basically takes a sledgehammer to the mainstream pursuit of a theory of everything. We're looking closely at a framework known as ACS. It's a dense, mathematically rigorous text, and its main argument, that we've been looking at the ultimate foundations of reality all wrong. If you enjoy deep physics, structural logic, and frankly, overturning century-old assumptions, you are absolutely going to love this.
Okay, let's dive into this. Have we literally been wasting our time chasing elegant equations that just don't actually describe the universe? The text we're analyzing today argues exactly that. It proposes that the decades-long hunt for a theory of everything has been driven by aesthetic desires rather than logical necessity. I want you to keep this high-stakes question in the back of your mind as we go through the concepts today, because it really challenges the foundational preconceptions of modern theoretical physics.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll tackle the ultimate physics contradiction. Then we'll look at the problem with pretty math. Next, we'll introduce the ACS framework, explore gravity as operator geometry, dig into the mathematical proof, and wrap the whole thing up with the true meaning of unification.
All right, part 1, the ultimate physics contradiction.
To really understand the cure, we first have to understand the disease, right? Think about the universe as we currently model it. Basically, everything reduces down to 25 particles and 4 fundamental interactions. Electromagnetism, the weak nuclear force, and the strong nuclear force are all perfectly neatly packaged in the standard model. This is a framework built entirely on quantum fields, discrete operator algebras, and probability. But then, we have the fourth force, gravity. Gravity is described by general relativity, which is a classical theory based on a continuous, smooth, curving geometry of spacetime.
And the source text is super authoritative here. It flat out calls these two frameworks mathematically and logically incompatible. This isn't just some abstract philosophical debate you have over coffee. It's a hard mathematical limit. The math of the incredibly small and the math of the incredibly massive directly contradict each other. At fundamental scales, these two theories literally cannot both be true.
Which brings us to part 2, the problem with pretty math.
So, how has the physics community been trying to solve this giant contradiction? Well, according to our source, they've been doing it entirely wrong. The text unleashes this sharp, impassioned critique of mainstream theories, whether we're talking about string theory or frameworks proposed by thinkers like Garrett, Lisi, Weinstein, or Stephen Wolfram. The author argues that these theories start with a mathematical object they find aesthetically elegant, like a symmetry group or a really clever hypergraph, and then they try to force-fit physical reality into it. But by doing that, they completely fail to resolve the actual inconsistencies. They don't derive the standard model, they don't explain why space-time even exists, they completely miss the boat on explaining quantum measurement, and they straight up violate locality.
If there's one single core philosophy you take away from the author's critique, it's got to be this: consistency drives progress. Aesthetics do not. Historically speaking, physics hasn't moved forward just because someone drew a beautiful equation on a chalkboard. Special relativity was born specifically to fix an inconsistency between Maxwell's equations and Galilean relativity. Quantum mechanics was born to fix the inconsistency in atomic spectra. Building theories on elegant symmetry while ignoring the core contradictions, that's fundamentally backwards.
Okay, part 3. Enter the ACS framework.
So the crucial point is, what is the actual alternative to pretty math? Well, the ACS framework is proposed as the minimal, consistent extension required to fix this current mess. And the biggest takeaway is how ACS completely discards the smooth background manifold we all usually assume just naturally exists. Space-time is not fundamental here. There's no smooth canvas of space and time. Instead, underneath it all, there is operator geometry. Reality is actually a causal network of discrete, computational space-time events. Things like duration, volume, and distance, they don't fundamentally exist. They emerge combinatorially from this underlying network.
And the way the ACS framework was built directly reflects that no-nonsense philosophy. Step 1. Start with the actual glaring inconsistencies. General relativity and quantum mechanics can't both be true. Standard interpretations violate locality, and measurement just isn't explained. So, step 2. Mathematically force minimal constraints. ACS imposes hard rules like determinism, spectral constraints, and branch stability. It doesn't guess what the universe looks like, it literally computes what the universe must look like in order to preserve realism, embed gravity, and naturally generate the exact quantum statistics we observe.
Moving on to part 4, gravity as operator geometry.
And this brilliantly illustrates how this radical new geometry actually handles the elephant in the room, gravity. It shows exactly why traditional physics has been kind of stuck in the mud since Feynman and DeWitt tried, and utterly failed, to quantize gravity back in the 1960s. They tried to treat gravity like electromagnetism, which just led to infinite mathematical divergences. But in the ACS approach, gravity doesn't need to be quantized because it's not a quantum field to begin with. It's actually the macroscopic shadow, the large-scale limit of these underlying discrete operator dynamics.
By bypassing that traditional continuous geometry, ACS just naturally resolves these massive gaps in our understanding. It's like a giant puzzle suddenly fitting together. What is a quantum measurement? Under ACS, it's just branch stabilization in this network flow. What's quantum entanglement? Simply shared branch ancestry in the causal structure. Dark matter becomes geometric spectral defects. Dark energy is vacuum stabilization pressure. And space-time itself is an emergent interval structure. Everything just clicks into place logically, not aesthetically.
All right, part 5, the mathematical proof.
Now, what's really interesting here is that talk is extremely cheap in theoretical physics, right? But the source material is totally adamant that ACS is not just philosophy. It is backed by a rigorous, computationally executable mathematical registry. Notice the extreme specificity. ACS mathematically limits standard quantum field theories at a hard physical boundary called the Planck floor, represented by a minimum threshold. Below that scale, there is absolutely zero continuum. Instead, you're tracking discrete post-it matrices using a combinatorial graph Laplacian. It tracks non-local connectivity weights, and the framework literally forces dimensional reduction. This means as you zoom all the way down, the universe functionally behaves as a two-dimensional structure before zooming back out to the 4 dimensions we actually experience.
And the absolute engine driving all of this is something called pi flow. Now, that sounds highly technical, I know, but think of it simply as the core updating mechanism of reality. It's a stochastic operator update dynamic. It bypasses all those infinite infinities of perturbative quantization by driving the network into stable, fixed-point attractors. Pi flow is literally the fundamental machinery generating the continuous reality that you and I eventually perceive.
Furthermore, the source lays out an exact computational validation pipeline. We're given hard metrics here. We have an expected K effective value of 1.5094, which tracks network connectivity, and a Wmax alignment target of 0.9841 to ensure structural stability. This is a strict, undeniable tripwire system. If a supercomputer runs the ACS equations and the fixed point alignment falls below 0.95, the author outright states the claim is a failure. That is what really sets this apart. It's deeply, fundamentally falsifiable.
Finally, part 6, the true meaning of unification. So how does the whole shebang tie together? Well, according to the ACS text, unification isn't just some aesthetic goal we should cross our fingers and hope to achieve. It is a structural consequence of the math itself. The only reason the standard model and gravity aren't unified in our current experiments is simply that we haven't reached the extreme energy scales required to actually see that underlying discrete operator structure where they intrinsically link up.
Let's move to and see how this builds on existing theories, specifically something called asymptotic safety. This is the idea that gravity might become well-behaved at super high energies. ACS doesn't just throw this idea in the trash. Instead, it completely recontextualizes it. ACS reveals that asymptotic safety is actually just the effective large-scale limit, the shadow, really, of the true, deeper pi-flow operator structure underneath it all. It beautifully shows how past theories captured a piece of the truth, but ultimately missed the fundamental bedrock. And that brings us to a very, very specific number, 2.021. You see, the ACS framework makes a unified, falsifiable empirical prediction here. It predicts that the macroscopic running spectral dimension, which is a measurement of how dimensionality scales, will read exactly 2.021 at a massive cosmological scale of 100 megaparsecs. If observational astronomy bounds show a different number, the entire core kinetic update law of ACS is completely falsified. It totally puts its money where its mouth is.
Which leads us to our final thought today. Given this incredibly exhaustive framework, is physics actually ready to prioritize logical consistency over beautiful mathematics? If the ACS text is right, abandoning our comforting assumptions of a smooth, continuous universe is literally the only way forward. I really challenge you to look at the next flashy physics headline through this new, consistency-driven lens. Ask yourself, are they just drawing pretty graphs, or are they actually solving the contradictions?
Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gave you a radically new perspective on the very fabric of reality.